Welcome to Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co-host, Chris Kay. Today, we're taking you to the height of groove metal and the beginnings of nu metal, metalcore, and one of its most eclectic artists.
The first band formed in Brazil in 1984 and rose to prominence in the mid-90s with releases like Arise and Chaos AD. The other band began after the lead singer and rhythm guitar player quit the first band at the end of 1996 following the death of his stepson.
If you haven't guessed by now, we have Sepultura's Roots versus Soulfly's self-titled debut in a head-to-head that features Max Cavalera versus himself. Who will come out on top? My guess is going to be Max, but anyway. Sepultura Roots versus...
I don't know.
versus Soulfly. All right, so I know that this is not one of your favorite subjects, sort of kind of like science or math for some people. In this particular case, this is nu metal, groove metal, metalcore-ish stuff in there that's not really your favorite stuff, Chris.
It's, no pun intended, the early roots of those genres.
Exactly.
And... you know, Sepultura is a band I really like, especially in their earlier albums. But Roots is around the time that I kind of dropped off from the band. And then Soulfly, I didn't even hear for years until after. I had probably heard like a song here or there, but I didn't hear the full album until I want to say like late 2000s.
Soulfly, the way they are now, you're probably more into you would probably be more into what they do now compared to what they did then, because
that was kind of one of the things was because of what Soulfly was at the beginning, I totally overlooked them, and then when I heard their later stuff, I mean they've got a new album coming out this year, and when I've heard that, I was like, oh. What the hell?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm kind of the opposite and went the opposite direction. I really dug their first 3 albums and maybe even a couple more later. But as they've gotten harder and harder and more extreme, I've listened to them less and less. And It's weird because in reality, I should be listening to that, not necessarily more and more, but I've opened myself up enough to say I should be able to, enjoy this, but I haven't even put it on, period, to sit there and say, what is it about the new stuff that I like or don't like? And it's not because it's not been on purpose or anything like that. It's just you and I have been so busy doing the shows and listening to all this other stuff and the stuff that you've introduced me to that I really haven't had time to go back to listen to the newer Soulfly stuff. Just weird.
Well, I mean, that's part of what we do is we're finding new stuff to listen to as well.
Exactly.
So, who knows?
All right, so Roots versus Soulfly's first album. So the specs on this. Sorry, Sepultura at the time in 1996 was Max Cavalera on vocals and rhythm guitars, Andreas Kisser on lead guitars, Paolo Jr. on bass, and Igor Cavalera on drums. Roots was released on February 20th, 1996 on Roadrunner Records, recorded at Indigo Ranch in Malibu, California, and it was produced by Ross Robinson. You're going to go ahead and take the lead on this one and introduce all the tracks, and we'll go ahead and talk about it.
So, from what I understood, following Chaos AD, they were at kind of an impasse, because Chaos AD was pretty big for them. Kind of opened up the world in a way for them as a band. And so they put out Roots where their producer, you said Ross Robinson?
Yes.
He kind of pushed them to bring in a lot of the elements of their culture. So you're going to hear a lot of that through Roots. So the album starts off with Roots, Bloody Roots. You can tell immediately that Sepultura has kind of fully evolved into groove and nu metal. They've changed from some death metal elements and some more melodic stuff, and this is definitely groove. The vocals are pretty brutal. The percussion is just integral for that sound, and by that I mean that kind of Brazilian metal sound, and it's just heavy. But for me, it kind of loses something from Chaos AD, and that's more of the melodic sensibilities that were kind of still there, even though they were being phased out. But this is a really good song. It's a great start to the album.
I thought so. Listening to when the album came out and was released, and I picked it up, getting into song one, this song to me kicked ass. I am someone so. For not a lot of you, I'm just trying to explain this so it doesn't sound totally weird and offensive. So people who obviously everyone who's listening to the show doesn't know who I am personally. So to understand who I am, I'm a Latin American who grew up in a pretty much traditional, for lack of a better term, white American household. It's kind of weird that way. My grandmother, even though my grandparents spoke Spanish to each other, she went out of her way to make sure she spoke English. We didn't do a lot of like traditional Puerto Rican things that other Puerto Rican families would do. And so I didn't have that exposure to Latin music as much as other Puerto Ricans who grew up in New York did, or Dominicans, or any Caribbean islanders, as I like to call us. So there's a part of me that when I listen to this music, and this was even before I married my wife now, who has introduced me and kind of expanded my musical horizon when it comes to the Latin culture. There was always something about me that loved drums. I love percussion. Now, the white American side of me that I say I grew up as is that I don't have a lot of rhythm, which is weird because I'm Puerto Rican. But so I'm not great at keeping time. So as a drummer, I would suck. But then again, at the same time, I've never practiced enough to sit there and say, I would be bad or good at it, because I do play instruments, so I can keep time to some extent, but I'm not the timekeeper. So anyway,
you're not the atomic clock.
No, I am not the atomic clock whatsoever. So anyway, to bring an end to this kind of introduction about who I am, after 2.5 years of doing this, the rhythms that Sepultura have come up with this album, or even some on Chaos AD, even some on Chaos AD, really, really attracted me. I love Igor's playing, especially on this album. A lot of, especially on Chaos and this one. And then, we're going to talk about Soulfly's album with Roy Mayorga on drums. I mean, the drumming is really what attracts me. So for this song, I won't even call it slow. It's very plodding, very heavy, but very, very cool. I love this song, but you can tell it's not the same Sepultura that was out 2 years prior with Chaos AD. You can see every single album they progress and evolved more and more and more. And this album was definitely a sign of the times. And this song was the intro to that.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell. It's 1996, and bands are starting to use solos less, etc. That's kind of like a theme here. It's simplified in a lot of ways, but it's very heavy. So that takes us to track 2, Attitude. This is the song that was co-written by Max's stepson Dana, who would pass away not long after this album would come out. And I mean that co-written by our lyrics. The beginning sounds more industrial than nu metal, and it's pretty sludgy. It feels very simple compared to the earlier outings. Like kind of like I mentioned, you're losing a lot of that melody, but it's they kind of, I want to say songs like this from this band and a few others really kind of created the sound of what a breakdown would become. Like and what I mean is like that metalcore breakdown. This song almost sounds like the whole thing almost sounds like a metalcore breakdown.
I agree that there's a lot of, especially on this album, and especially when we get into Soulfly's album, where there's those parts where, in metalcore, they can be playing a million miles an hour, super heavy, screaming, whatever, and then all of a sudden the whole band just stops. It becomes a headbanging jam of really slow, heavy, plotting riffs, and then it can lead into different directions from there. And
well, the singer would usually yell something like, disrespect your surroundings, or something. And then,
I don't really think they said disrespect your surroundings, but okay.
Those are actual lyrics. What band is that?
I have no clue who that is.
I'm gonna look it up while you continue.
But for me, this song is, again, you go into you're coming out of Roots, and you have this song that intros with a traditional berumbao percussive instrument that's kind of like a bow, almost like a bow and arrow type of bow, and it's percussive. It has that little intro, and then it just, once it gets going, the tribal rhythms of this song is really what hooks me in. It's a really heavy song. Like you said, Max and Dana wrote the lyrics for this, so there's a lot of personalness to this, with especially with Dana's lyrics on this. So I think it's a cool song, but again, it is one of those things where Sepultura is totally diverging away from where they were once several years prior.
So the song with Disrespect Your Surroundings is Mr. Highway's Thinking About the End by A Day to Remember.
Oh, Jesus. Day to Remember.
Okay, that takes us into track 3, which is Cutthroat. Again, this is kind of a more simplified song. It's a bit repetitive. It's pretty short. Got some of the, I would say, more punkish aspects of Sepultura, where it's still more metal, but where punk will kind of like attack. It'll hit, real quick and then jet out. Like that's an aspect that I think Sepultura captures in the metal realm a little bit, I would say pretty well. They take that idea of what a punk song is and makes it metal. And, it's not my favorite track on the album, but it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool song. Definitely the chorus is straightforward. It's not a lot. It's very repetitive, just saying Cutthroat
exactly.
over and over again. You got some typical guitar tones at the beginning. The whole thing with it, especially, it really, really started to take effect during Chaos AD, to me, I believe that it's Andreas's playing that has that high pitch, almost kind of like a squeal, kind of like a siren sound to it. A lot of the times, he's the one who kind of has a lot to do with that. That's what I think, because. On the flip side, Max's guitars only have 4 strings. He doesn't even have the 2 bottom strings on it, because all he does is play those heavy riffs. So he doesn't even use those, because he's a straight rhythm guitar player. He doesn't play any leads whatsoever. So that's why I think those high pitched squeals and siren sounds are all Andreas. So that's the way kind of the song has a little bit of that in the intro, and it has a really killer chug riff, before it gets going into the verse. And so I think the song is cool, but again, yeah, like you said, it is a little repetitive with the Cutthroat over and over again.
So track 4 is, forgive me on this one, you might have to correct me on it. It's Rara Mahara.
Yep.
And so this one features David Silveria and Carlinos Brown. I don't know why Brown gave me trouble there.
You went right through his first name and then got stuck on Brown.
So David is from Korn, right?
Yes, he's from Korn.
Okay. So what I like about this track is that the tribal sound of it is really cool. It's a little bit more experimental and percussive. Like, I would say this is one of the most percussive tracks on the album. The lyrics mostly consist of some slang words from Brazilian culture and characters of, I would say, like Brazilian lore. To me, it's a really interesting track. It's one of the highlights on the album for me, to be honest.
Wow, I did not think that you would say that, but it is a pretty cool song. Again, like you said, very percussive, very tribal, and by saying very tribal, here's the thing. For those of you listening out there, we're going to use the word tribal a lot to describe songs on these two albums, because that's what Sepultura did. They literally not adopted, but embraced their heritage from being from Brazil and from being from poor areas. And so, like you said, Ross Robinson, encouraged them to look at their culture, look at their country, and take something from it. And man, they dove head first. So these two albums are very, very similar, in my opinion. So there's a lot of tribalness, there's a lot of rhythms, there's a lot of drumming and percussion throughout both of these albums. So, and this is the one that really highlights this album a lot. So I think it's a pretty cool song. You think it's a pretty cool song. So, yes, the song features, and I don't know where Carlinhos Brown is from, but I know it does definitely feature David Silveira from Korn on percussion. So there's a nice, good mixture, good, I guess, not combination, but what do you call that when two people, a collaboration, I guess. Yeah, there's a nice collaboration between David and Igor on this song.
Yeah, the percussion is definitely the highlight here. So that takes us to track 5, which is A Breed Apart. It's got a really cool opening riff, followed by some... See, I'm not a big fan of vocal fry, where it's that, kind of... I would say Peter Steele was somebody who used a lot of vocal fry. Now, I would say more often than not, like some bands like In Flames use it, where it's kind of that down deep, bassy kind of sound that people try to force a bit. Mm-hmm. And then Valley Girls use it a lot. So that happens, and I don't know why it's become such a thing. But, what's cool, though, is the vocal fry is kind of mixed with these almost like black metal growls. Max is really going the kind of primal sounding with those growls. And it's got some really cool tribal percussion sections, and the song really leaves me wondering if Max wants us to open our minds and go our own way, because he repeats that line about 400 times.
There was a lot of I guess you would say eye-opening experiences for Max and the band on this particular album when they went to Brazil and they recorded, in some of the rainforest tribal areas. Mm-hmm. But he definitely gets a little guttural. He gets a little in tune with his primitive side, not to be punny. But the song is cool. I mean, it's got there's a riff in there that I don't know if it's the same riff that's in Roots, but there's a very familiar riff that keeps popping up throughout the song at various times. I want to say it's the Roots riff, but I didn't get a chance to really compare. So it's an interesting song, that's for sure. I do like the drum intro, because it almost sounds like a drum line at the beginning, and it goes into that really heavy rhythm and heavy riff. But yeah, it's an interesting song for sure.
All right, so that takes us to track 6, Straight Hate. This is pretty heavy, sludgy one. It has a little bit more industrial aspect to the sound. The intro takes a bit, but it's got a nice build up. And, I think the biggest problem for me is that there's just not a lot that happens. It feels very weighty, I think is a good way to put it. Like, it's heavy, but it feels like something is holding the song back in a way.
I kind of get that sense of what you're saying. It's weird because the song starts off real heavy, real quick, and then goes into this bass heavy rhythm that has some cool guitar work behind it. And to me, the one word I have on my notes is methodic. This song to me is very methodic.
Okay.
But there's not a lot, there's not a lot to it. So that's part of the issue. Like, even though this album was successful, and basically carried by the title track, if you want to call Roots Bloody Roots the title track, and a couple other songs, but there's so much eclecticness to this album. It goes in so many different directions, but they're all kind of circle around the same type of thing. That's all tribal, but there's different directions within that tribalness that it goes in. This one is one of those songs that kind of doesn't really have a focus per se, even though it's methodic. It's kind of weird in that regards.
It feels a little underdeveloped, like it just didn't quite get there.
Right.
So that takes us to track 7, Spit. This is I would say a metal punk song in a lot of ways. It's short, sweet, and it's a lot faster paced than some of the stuff that came before. There's not a lot to say other than it has some aspects of some Chaos AD kind of stuff on it. So if you like Chaos AD, this is one of the tracks that kind of lends itself more to that style.
Yeah, this is one of the songs that definitely says, "Oh yeah, this is Sepultura," and that's their style when they are playing the way they want to play. Put it that way. To me, the song has a lot of groove in it. But yeah, you're right. It's a little punky. It's a punky metal kind of song, and it's in their pocket when they're jamming fast.
Yep. All right, so that's track 8, Look Away. This features Jonathan Davis, Mike Patton, and DJ Lethal. Mike Patton, we just recently talked about. He was part of Faith No More, Mr. Bungle, etc. He's got a ton of bands. Very talented vocalist. Jonathan Davis of Korn, and DJ Lethal. I want to say he played with Limp Bizkit, right?
He is the DJ for Limp Bizkit. He was also the DJ for House of Pain.
Gotcha. Okay. So the song is called Look Away, and I Would Rather Listen Away. I really have a hard time finding anything to like about this track. For me, I've never really liked Jonathan Davis's vocal style. I can kind of respect, he does a lot of interesting things with his vocals. Same with Mike Patton. Mike Patton's very skilled and talented musician, but yes, vocalist. But man, this song is just not for me. The best thing I can say about it is it's awful.
All right, folks, tell us how you really feel. I'm not going to say it's the best song on the album, that's for sure. It starts off slow and atmospheric, and it gives way to a very guttural Max singing, spoken words, almost that Fry stuff you were talking about, the vocal Fry. And this song never really picks up. It doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of just plods away until the end. So I agree with you. It's not one of their better songs. Horrible. I don't know about that, but I get it. It's not one of their best.
So moving on to Dusted. So at the beginning of this track, I always think, because I've heard it many times, I always think that Lars must have heard this and said, "That's the drum sound I want for Saint Anger." Like, it's got that dung dung dung, and so what's interesting about it is you listen to the track and it's very garagey sounding. It actually sounds like, I kind of wish they had used a mix like this for Saint Anger, because maybe the songs would sound a little better, because the drum part, it does go back to more of a traditional snare sound, and it's not bad. It's not one of my favorites, but the riff in the middle is really nice. It's obviously, again, more of that groove nu metal, but it does have some thrashy parts in it. And like I said, that riff in the middle is more of a thrashy sound, and it's been a while since Sepultura really kind of used thrash, so it's nice to hear.
Yes, I liked it for all of the same reasons that you just said. It's definitely a riff heavy song. I like it. It's not one of my favorites, but I like it. And it's funny you bring up the thing you called it garagey, because, as we all know, everyone kept talking about Saint Anger. Oh, they're trying to make it sound like a band that's playing in a garage. Well, then they should have went to a fucking garage and recorded inside the garage, because that clanging fucking metal 55-gallon snare drum sound is not a freaking garage sound.
No.
But I tell you this. Pick up, if anyone out there doesn't have it, pick up a copy of Some Kind of Monster, the remix version. I think it has some live tracks. I think it was an EP that came out after the album. That has a completely different mix. It has a completely different drum sound. And it's also edited, so it doesn't have a ton of that extra bullshit on that song. That is a really good version of Some Kind of Monster. And it would almost make you say, why didn't they mix the whole album like this? So there you go. Dusted. It's pretty cool. Move on.
All right, so that takes us to track 10, Born Stubborn. So it starts off with this kind of warning sound, like an alarm. It's very heavy, has the kind of that Pantera heaviness, I would say. About the 2-minute mark, there's a breakdown, which I feel like these songs, again, were really the inspiration to what metalcore's breakdowns are. Because this one actually, it's not like the whole song is kind of a breakdown. This one actually has a breakdown section.
It's not the whole song, it's just the breakdown part.
Well, I mean, that's kind of revolutionary in a way, because there wasn't a bands really doing that at this time.
No, I mean, you're right. That's the breakdown is definitely, it's weird. So, growing up, I always wanted, songs to have a certain like start stop rhythm to them, because I always thought those were the cooler songs, right? And then when rap became a thing, and like Aerosmith and Run DMC, collaborated, and then there was a couple of others that happened throughout the 80s or late 80s. Then when Rage Against the Machine came out, I was like, oh yeah, that's the perfect blend of rap and metal, right? To some degree. Mm-hmm. I did not necessarily think that Korn was that kind of answer. And then in, I think it was 95, I heard Stuck Mojo, and I was like, wow, that's even more into almost like a traditional hip hop with a metal background, right? And it's one of those things where every time these things evolved and these songs evolved, I was like, oh, I like that. I like that style. I want to hear this. So when breakdowns became a thing, I realized that was something I was missing from songs, or I wanted to hear in songs, where you go through this, and not necessarily eliminating the guitar solos to get this breakdown part, but it was cool when you heard the song kind of almost come to a stop, so that they can then, do this, a cheer, a yell, get the crowd into it, get this heavy riff going. Because it's kind of like I Am the Law from Anthrax kind of has that during the pre-mosh part that they have in there, where they get really heavy in the rhythm, and they do it a couple of times throughout some of the songs that they did in the late 80s. So it was something that was kind of hinted at, but, guitar solos would always overtake those parts. But then all of a sudden someone said, hey, if we don't do a guitar solo here and we do maybe a spoken word part, but with some really heavy, chuggy riffs, that might be pretty cool, which eventually became the breakdown. It's just basically a headbanging part.
Yeah, definitely. The breakdown is almost a cultural thing now within the metal community. There's certain people in the metal community that is their thing. And I've seen it. Like, I have a friend who's a bit younger than me that really enjoys metalcore. And something about that breakdown that just gets everyone so hyped. I don't get it because that's not my, genre of metal. But I respect it too. Like, it's part of the show. And I even when I went to there was a former friend of mine that he had a band, a metalcore band. Went to go see their show, and it was cool. The vibe of the people there, especially with the breakdowns and stuff like that. It just you can appreciate what other people enjoy sometimes too. So,
yeah.
So the next song, wow, it is Jasko, I believe is the pronunciation, and that means marijuana. This is a
I smell something.
A really nice guitar instrumental. It shows a lot of Andreas's acoustic skill. It's nice.
It's just an acoustic instrumental. It is nice. It's not one that. It's not one of those songs that have like a beginning, middle, end kind of thing. So it just highlights his skills.
It's not an Eddie Van Halen solo, but it's nice.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's nice. So one of two instrumentals on this album.
Well, three technically, right? Because Canyon Jam would also be an instrumental.
That's right. Technically, yes. Technically.
I want to say that the next one's called It's Sorry.
Yes.
And it's another instrumental, again, acoustic guitar, but it's accompanied by some tribal chanting. I thought it was a little odd to put two instrumentals back to back, especially because they don't really tie in together other than there's some similarities. But I guess it's not really a problem either. It doesn't bother me. It's just a large chunk of instrumental section in the middle. Well, in the latter half of the album. Definitely
the latter half. So the tribal instrumental features I think it's pronounced a Zavante tribe. They're from eastern Brazil, and it's just that. It's a instrumental song that features that tribe, with their percussion and their and I say percussion because it's very loosely, hand and clapping and stuff like that. But
it's man-made percussive, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just chanting and man-made percussion. It's just a real simple song. It's one of those experiences that Sepultura decided they wanted to share with their fans, and it's okay. It doesn't really do much for me.
I like it. I almost wish the two had been combined in some way, so that it was. But I guess I get also they are two different. Wow, my mind went blank. They are two different compositions, but it's it's a cool thing. It ties a lot into that vibe of the album, so it's nice. I don't really love it or hate it. It's just it fits the vibe of the album. I would say is probably my best description of it.
Alrighty.
So that would be track 13, and that's Ambush. Ambush starts with a more traditional Sepultura sound. It's heavy, has more of a similar sound to material off of Chaos AD once again, and that's really for the first half, I would say. And it actually has one of the only solos on the album in the latter half. The middle of the song goes back to that kind of tribal instrumental section, and then it goes back into the metal and that solo at the end again, like I said, which is really cool.
Yeah, I like the way the song starts off with the start-stopping riff, and that to me is one of those things that I enjoy about songs, or metal songs in general. But the song does kind of plod away, and then it gives away to those tribal rhythms, midway through, and then you have the guitar solo at the end. So it's an odd song because it's really heavy at first, then it kind of just stops at that point and says, okay, we're going to do this tribal thing, and then all of a sudden we're going to throw some guitar rhythm solo stuff, over that. So it's a weird song in that regards, but I do like the riffs at the beginning.
So I did like Ambush, but track 14 I like a little better. Endangered Species. This one's another heavy, aggressive, sludgy track. It's got some minor scale aspects, which I really like. And, it really sets this kind of, not creepy, but like a dark mood to it. And it has a legit solo. Like, it is my favorite solo on the album. It's just a good track.
It's a very cool track. I like it. It's slow and heavy riff heavy. Slow and heavy riff heavy. I actually wrote that.
You must have been tired.
It was just a little while ago.
Oh, then you're definitely tired.
It's a heavy riff on a riff heavy song. I guess you could say it that way. And so it's pretty cool. I do like it a little bit more than some of the other songs that I had been listening to up to that point. So it tells you that much.
So that takes us into track 15, Dictator Shit. The track starts off with some static that will ignite your tinnitus. It's a punky, heavy track, and if you like that vocal distortion that they've been doing, this one has it in spades.
Yeah, I wrote down that this is a punky speed metal song. This is like, for the most part, this is like Sepultura's wheelhouse. Song like that they did on B-sides, like Policia and Crucificados pelos Sistemas. Those punky kind of songs that they did as B-sides, this is like that. And this is a pretty cool song. To me, this is more enjoyable than a lot of stuff that I have been listening to up to this point on this album. So it almost feels like the last couple songs, if they had been on side one, I probably would listen to side one beginning to end all the time. But they left it towards the end, and it kind of like, yeah, it's so fast. It's one of those end album kind of songs.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, but there is one song left.
Yes, and that is Canyon Jam, which is track 16. So this is another instrumental. It's an interesting, tribal percussion instrumental, wraps things up. It's, I guess, technically considered a hidden track because if it was on the CD, I believe it was connected to track 15.
Yes.
But, it's one of those, like, it closes out the vibe of the album. It's not, you're never going to load this up. I don't know. Maybe there's a guy out there that would and be like, man, I really want to listen to Canyon Jam.
I doubt it.
You never know. But it's all right. It fits the vibe of the album, as in, there's these instrumentals that are throughout it. There's, again, all the tribal sections in songs that all kind of connect, and this finishes everything out.
Yeah, I mean, it's Sepultura hanging out with a local tribe, and they're just jamming, literally jamming, and Ross Robinson recorded it and put it on the end of the album as a That's a hidden track. That's all it is. Cool for what it is.
So overall, to me, it's a step down from Chaos AD. But on many occasions when I've been doing this, where I listen to albums again, maybe I haven't listened to them for many years. Again, this came out in 1996, so it's been quite a while since I've really listened to Roots. I've heard the title track a few times in that time, but Chaos AD is, Arise, Chaos AD, Beneath the Remains. To me, those are the three big ones for Sepultura that I like to listen to. But that being said, I did find some things to really appreciate about this album. That's kind of the fun thing about doing this and really analyzing an album all the way through, is you do find some things that you never thought, I'd go back and listen to at all. There's a maturity that's very respectable, and experimentation really adds to that. The bringing in those Brazilian roots, I think that's a really admirable thing to do. You could easily emulate other people's sound, but that's not something that I think the Sepultura ever did. They did find other genres and say, we're going to be a death metal band, but they always included their heritage in their music. But this is the prime example of that. They've really dived into it, like you said, head first. They fully committed to it being a Brazilian sounding album.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I love the tribal sounds, and it's heavy, which is also great. I don't think people often think about just what that definition of heavy is, because it can be a lot of things, and sometimes you don't have to play a million notes to be heavy. You just have to have that sound that just dominates, and that's kind of what's going on here. It does lose some of the elements that I really love, like the guitar solos are very sparse here. And I, like I said at the beginning, this is kind of where Sepultura lost me, but there's a lot to respect here. And if you love that mixture of that Latin sound along with metal, this is a really good album.
It is, and it's definitely a detour for Sepultura, because in reality, this is the last album that they recorded with Max. And Max would go on to do Soulfly. They go on to continue Sepultura, and they bring in Derek Green. And they kind of go back to doing more of the thrashy metal stuff than they do the tribal stuff. And Max goes on to literally do like a Roots Part 2. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So there is that distinction. This was a kind of like a stopping point, and everybody went in a different direction. So it's very interesting situation that kind of happens with this album. I like the album overall. Is it their best album? Definitely not. I mean, for me, my favorite is Chaos AD. I think you're a big fan of Arise and Beneath the Remains. So, it's one of those things where this album had a lot of stuff going on with it, but it was not necessarily all good. But at the same time, I think it had to happen for them. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, Max would leave the band shortly after, or basically at the end of the touring cycle for this album. Middle of the summer of 1996, Dana Wells is killed in a car accident. There's a lot of mystery surrounding this situation as to why there was a car accident. Max's wife, Gloria, which that Dana was her son. To this day, Max as well can think and believe that this was a murder, that he was killed on purpose. I don't know all the details. I think that there was more to it with the two passengers that were in the car with Dana. I believe were the targets that from the other car that was chasing them. And I think it's just one of those situations where Dana kind of got involved by accident. but that's just my thought from looking on the outside. I don't know much about the details. So in August 1996, when he passes away, Sepultura is playing Castle Donington out in England, and Max literally arrives that day and turns around and goes back home. Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon offer him their jet plane to go back to the States, back to Phoenix, and the band Sepultura plays as a 3-piece that day, and then Max rejoins the band, rejoins the tour, and they basically fired Gloria as their manager, and Max said, well, I'm out of here as well. And his last show was in December of 1996, and in 1997 Max starts Soulfly. So the first album that they put out is the self-titled debut album. It came out on April 21st, 1998 on Roadrunner Records, recorded at Indigo Ranch in Malibu, California. It was produced by Ross Robinson, and Richard Kaplan also provided some engineering and some additional production. Now, if you were listening carefully, these statistics, or not statistics, but this information, this production information, is identical to what happened on Sepultura's Roots album, including Richard Kaplan. Richard Kaplan is part of the production team with Ross Robinson. So it's interesting because I just now looked at the production information for the album Against, which was the next Sepultura album, and they have a different production team. So it kind of makes you wonder whose side who was on, and this kind of tells you, sort of like how Ted Templeman went with Van Halen for one album after Dave left, but he also helped Dave, and then all of a sudden Eddie didn't like Ted, so Eddie took, I think the guy's last name was Dundee. I can't remember his first name.
Crocodile.
To produce to produce OU812. So it's one of those weird things, but the production team, so that makes a lot of sense as to why these two albums have so many similarities. Soulfly at this point consisted of Max Cavalera on vocals, rhythm guitars, berimbau, sitar, and agogo, which is a percussive bell instrument. Jackson Bandera on guitars, Marcelo D. Rapp on bass, acoustic bass, and double bass, and Roy Mayorga and he's also, I believe, the drummer for Stone Sour now. I'm not exactly sure, but he was on drums, percussion, and tambora. So,
is that Richie Tambora? I'm sorry,
not Sambora, but
by the way, it's Don Landy.
So I combined the names together to make Dundee. Okay. Don Landy. I knew it was a D in there somewhere, like a D-E-E.
Let's see. My memories of Soulfly. Again, I didn't listen to a lot of it because I heard the singles on the radio. We actually had a metal station here in Houston for some amount of time back then, and it disappeared. Wasn't
it K-Rock or something like that?
KLOL, and that disappeared, I would say, roughly in the early 2000s. I had just started driving, and I was excited, and then it was gone.
Damn shame.
So Soulfly, I remember a lot of people being into them, being very excited about this album. It's a coastal city, so we have a lot of Hispanic people here. And this is really cool because it integrates the metal sounds again with those kind of South American sounds. Very unique at the time. I don't think there was a lot of bands doing this kind of thing, and carrying that over from Sepultura. Max, I would say brought that to kind of another level with this.
Oh, definitely. I mean, now that Max basically was free of whatever constraints that Sepultura may or may not have put on him, it definitely showed on this album as he obviously had 100% input on everything that went on in this album, songwriting wise. So we're going to start it off with the first song that anyone heard from Soulfly, and that was Eye for an Eye. First Soulfly song, first single. To me, it's got a killer opening riff. It's got a really cool drum pattern. This is a great song to introduce Soulfly to the world, in my opinion. There is a little bit, when I say little, it's very short and very minimal. And what I would say almost like 3 or 4 notes in terms of a guitar solo that kind of like is that background squeal that I was kind of talking about that Andreas was perfecting in Sepultura. This guy did the same thing, and it kind of slows into that tribal breakdown chant part towards 2/3 of the way into the song. But I think it's a killer song.
So the guy you're talking about is Dino Cazares. So Burton C. Bell and Dino Cazares at the time were part of Fear Factory. Burton has since left the band, but they are both featured on this track. What's interesting. So I think it's about like 8 or 9 seconds in. So it's just silent, and then all of a sudden it just smacks you in the face, right? It's just like bam, the song starts.
Yeah, there's sort of like a couple of crickets at the beginning, and then all of a sudden, boom.
So you're kind of like sitting there anticipating, and then all of a sudden it just bam. All right, it's heavy. It shows that Max has fully kind of gone into this new metal sound rather than kind of keeping any of the earlier stuff from Sepultura. This is a new direction, even though it does have a lot of similarities, like you said, to Roots. This is a different Max than if you were expecting him to go back to Chaos ED. There's some chanting, like you said, towards the end, and it has kind of like those typical, not typical, but like those the cultural stylings that he brought in on Roots. So you can see that this is a continuation, like you kind of like, I think you said like a Roots part 2 almost.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about cultural stuff, it's all over this album.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, it's in every song, and and it's not a bad thing. It's just it's different, and Max definitely embraced everything. But at this time, Max also, it started on it started on Roots, where they were bringing in outside guests like DJ Lethal, like who was on that one song? Oh, David Silvera. They had these guests on the songs. So, Burton C. Bell, Dino Cazares, and then throughout the album, they bring in other artists on several songs. So yes, he's open to so many different kinds of music at this point. It all blends into this one album. Okay, so song number 2 is No Hope Equals No Fear.
So I wrote Ho Hope equals equals no
Ho Hope. No Hope Equals No Fear. I think it's another cool riff to open the song. The drums are a little more tribal than they were on Eye for an Eye. And that's, as we mentioned, it's going to be a running theme throughout this album. Max definitely embraces his roots, gets back to the roots, so to speak, embracing the Brazilian tribalness of the music. To me, this, I don't disagree with you when you talk about how there's new metal in Eye for an Eye, but this is the song to me that is more new metal-ish because of Max and the way he's singing, or if you want to call it rapping or chanting or whatever. This is where you can see that Max has embraced a completely different genre, a completely different style.
Yes.
Eye for an Eye had the breakdown-ish part, and it had the tribalness, but to me, I wouldn't have. That's why I had a hard time at first admitting that there's new metal on this album, because that song to me didn't have all those elements, but I could see where it was hinting at it, where No Hope Equals No Fear totally jumps into it.
Yeah, I would say this definitely a little more than the previous song. It's got those kind of rap rock vocals, not 100%, not like Limp Bizkit, like we'll hear later, but it does have like a talk box solo, and solo is maybe a little generous.
Well, I said it was a solo breakdown, or the solo breakdown on this song is a concoction of several different guitar sounds and rhythms.
Yes,
That's what I put down.
but I mean, specifically, it has that little talk box section. So the who uses that? Peter Frampton used the talk box a lot.
Slash uses it.
It fades out very industrial sounding at the end. Is it?
So you call it industrial, I call it atmospheric.
Well, I think it's like Fear Factory kind of sounding, which is funny because it doesn't have Fear Factory on it. But yeah, it's all right,
Okay. All right, so song number 3 is Bleed. It's the third single from the album. So we've already had the first, but we haven't had the second one yet, but that's coming later. The Bleed was the third single from the album. It's the first song on the album that's dedicated to Max's stepson, Dana. Let's see. What else did I write here? I got to flip my page. Where's the other page? Okay. I like the hi-hat intro that's in the song. It's a very emotional song as far as the lyrics are concerned. At the beginning, because Max is kind of screaming through it, but then it gives way to Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit,
which
him
made
and
me
DJ
emotional.
Lethal. Him and DJ Lethal are featured on the song, so it goes from a really extreme song to a rap metal Limp Bizkit kind of song.
So my notes were yuck. I'm going to review Bleed by Meshuggah here instead. So the alternating patterns and evolving and ever mutating riff make this a curiosity and a defining song in Meshuggah's catalog.
Jesus. You're so sad.
This is like, it's all right at the beginning, but it's like once it hits that Limp Bizkit part, it kind of loses like all the credibility in it being an emotional song, and I can't.
All right, so what are you going to do when we do Limp Bizkit versus Linkin Park, huh? What are you going to do?
I'm going to take a vacation.
All right, song number 4, Tribe. That is the 4th single from the album. Still haven't gotten to the second one. So this song starts out with a Brazilian chant about the Quilombola leader Zumbi dos Palmeiras. Zumbi dos Palmeiras. No, sorry, I got to say it right. The Quilombolo leader Zumbi dos Palmares, one of the last kings of the Quilombo dos Palmares tribes, and was one of the pioneers of the resistance of slavery, or the resistance to slavery of Africans by the Portuguese people who were colonizing Brazil. So there's a lot to this particular song, a lot of things very difficult to say. It is a tribal song. It's tribal in rhythm. The lyrics are celebrating the tribes of Brazil and life within the tribe. I think it's a pretty cool song myself. I like the tribalness of it. I like the rhythms of it. So to me, this song is enjoyable. I don't know how you feel about it.
So the lyrics themselves, I did like. I thought they were pretty good. There's some vocal stylings. I feel like he learned from Jonathan Davis here. Like there's some similarities to Korn. So there's
that really heavy yelling, scatting.
Yeah, kind of
shit.
Yeah, right. It's got a lot of vocal distortion. There are parts that I like, and I tend to really like the more tribal aspects of the song. And I do like at the end. So there's this really cool part. It goes into kind of like a traditional tribal melody where it goes into that kind of instrumentation, and then at the end it goes back into the metal instrumentation, but it mirrors the same melody there, which I thought was really cool. That to me was the best part of the whole track.
I agree. I just think this is a really cool song.
It was a clever way to end the song. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so next song, song number 5 is Boomba. The intro to this song is pretty cool. It's a cool jazzy intro that has a very similar sound and intro to the Doors' "Break On Through," although the Doors song goes quickly into the main rhythm and riff of the song. This one kind of just keeps tapping out for a little bit. It has a really cool riff with the main drum pattern that carries it before it hits the verses start. Again, the chorus is tribal. The breakdown part in this song features Los Hooligans rapping in Portuguese. So they're a Portuguese, I don't know if you want to call it a band or artists, but they're featured on this song doing that rap in Portuguese at the breakdown. I think it's a cool song, but it is kind of repetitive with the boomba all the time, but yet still kind of cool.
I mean, if you're looking for songs to put on your compilation about bass drums, then this is one that you should put on there for sure. Because boomba is a bass drum. I guess that joke didn't land. So, it doesn't stand out to me other than that kind of boomba repetitive vocal line.
It is very repetitive. I give you that.
It reminds me a lot of if this had come out later, this would have been somebody's theme song in early 2000s WWE. Or
I can see that.
Maybe, and I said, I would say maybe 2004-ish when they started bringing in new metal bands a lot. This would definitely be somebody's theme song.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. All right, so that brings us to First Commandment, which is the second song on the album that's dedicated to Dana. This intro starts with some background crickets and some tribal drums, which lead into a really cool riff. So it's more tribal patterns on this song. This song speaks directly to the, what's the word to use? Assailants, the accused, the murderers, if you will, that Max and Gloria believe, acted that night where Dana got killed. This is speaking directly to them. And, he's, the first commandment is thou shalt not kill. It's repeated throughout this song. He's singing, and then at the end he speaks directly to them. And it's a pretty interesting song. When you look at the lyrics, it could be emotional to some folks.
So I thought this was one of the better tracks on the album. It's got some industrial elements. So there was The Prodigy, and they had a little bit of heaviness to their electronic music, I would say. And it kind of reminded me of that middle era of The Prodigy in some ways. I don't know if other people really get that, I guess, but it also kind of ties into that tribal drumming at the end. I thought it was a pretty well-crafted song.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of the better songs in the album. It's funny you bring up the Prodigy thing because I can see it, but I'm not so versed on Prodigy. I mean, I'm really heard a couple of songs, and the one that stands out to me the most is Firestarter, only because Gene Simmons re-recorded that song. Okay. He covered it. But I'm not I'm not a fan of it, one, but two, there's one of the things I just did not get to hear very often when I was at the store, at the record store, because it just wasn't played very much in our store.
I grew up around people that listened to it. I was never an electronic music guy, but at the same time, when you're growing up and you're a kid, when you're around other people that listen to music, you don't get much choice in the matter.
True.
So that was one thing that I did hear quite a bit of with some of my friends was The Prodigy.
There you go. All right, song number 7, Bumclot. This song I like. I like a lot. Squealing guitar intro. And I say squealing, that's a squealing, high-pitched noise that Sepultura and Soulfly have perfected over the years. The riff is really cool on this song. But one of the things I really, really like about this song, is they have, so the song has got 3 verses. The first 2 verses, after Max sings the verses, and the drummer, Roy, goes into like a really fast drum roll to go into the chorus. On the third one, he doesn't do it fast. It's more like a rat-a-tat-tat. It's a little slower, put it that way. I think those kinds of things when you're recording songs or writing songs and putting them together, those are things that it shows how much time and effort you're putting into a song. And this song pays off. I personally think this is a really, really cool song. And, I forgot exactly what bum clap means, but it's not a good term for Rastafarian.
It means a couple things. Jamaican, it means blood clot. But it's also an insult that means motherfucker or piece of shit.
That's the one I'm going with for this song. I don't think he's talking about a blood clot.
No.
So I think it's a really cool song myself. So what are your thoughts on it?
It's another one of those that kind of plays off of a specific word, which is something that he does a lot. In his history with Sepultura and then moving on to Soulfly, Max would often pick like a word or a phrase and make that the subject of a song. And this is one of those. So it has a kind of a catchy vibe to it. It's one that you can kind of not headbang, but like nod along to, I guess. So to me, it's one of the more interesting songs on the album.
Okay, I'll give you that one. I truly enjoy Bum Clot. I think it's a really cool song. It's one of the first songs that attracted me on this album. There was Eye for an Eye and Bum Clot. So that was something that really stood out to me. All right, coming in after Bum Clot is Soulfly, which is an instrumental. This is the beginning of what would become basically a regular occurrence on all his albums. I believe maybe 1 or 2 don't have a Soulfly on it, but I could be wrong. But every single album that he does has the song Soulfly. So it's Soulfly 1, this is Soulfly 1. Soulfly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe only one album does not have it. And I did not check on that. But it's an atmospheric song, instrumental, and it has a couple of different phases, and then to me, the better part of the song starts about 2/3 of the way in, where there's this guitar solo that comes in, and the solo, for what it's worth, it kind of gives me a John Frusciante vibe to it, because it almost sounds like it's being played backwards. And I know John has that style that he can play and make it sound like that.
I can get that from there. Yeah, I mean, it's got a really nice build to it. Honestly, it's one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's a really nice instrumental. I had never really heard it before, so it was a pleasant surprise.
Okay, there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yes, I was right. There are 12 Soulfly albums and 11 Soulfly songs. On Ritual, Soulfly 11 was the last song. So there you go. I was right. For once. Okay. Next song is, let me say this right, Babaruma, which was the second single from the album. And this is a really cool song in that this is a cover of a Brazilian musician named Jorge Ben-Hor's. It's his song. It's a samba funk song about an African football striker. And for people who are not familiar with football, it's soccer in the United States, and
that was a funny way of saying that, honestly.
Yeah, well, I did that kind of on purpose.
If you're not familiar with football.
For those. Anyway, so it's about a soccer player. The song, in fact, when you listen to it, and I made the comparison, this is almost very, very true to the original. Obviously, modern sounds, modern recordings, and more tribal in a way than the original, but doesn't change the lyrics, doesn't change the rhythm, doesn't change really anything about the song. He just puts it through heavy guitars, heavy drums, and all that jazz. So it's a really, really cool version. I believe they did some really cool remixes on it. I can't remember if the World Cup was going on at the time, and that was one of those things to help cheer on Brazil during the World Cup. But it is a very cool song. This version also features Los Hooligans again, who appeared earlier in the album.
They did 3-4 different versions of this track, or I guess 3, including the original, the LP mix, and the World Cup mix, like you said. It's a cool track. I like it because it has that kind of appeal to being something kind of bigger than itself, right? Being part of the soccer or football experience. What I read was it's a chant done when dribbling past opponents. So I used to watch all the time when I worked at one of my previous jobs in the all the mill guys and the drivers, etc. Just ate it up, love football, and so we would watch the World Cup. It was a lot of fun during that time period because when everybody's involved and everybody's enjoying it, you can also feed off of that vibe, feed off of that emotion. Mm-hmm. So, this is a fun track. Like, it's just, I don't know how you couldn't like it, other than if you just don't like heavy music.
Yeah.
And then why are you listening to this podcast?
We want everybody to listen to this podcast. All right. Song number 10 on the album is Quilombo. And not Columbo, the cigar.
I was gonna say, I used to watch this show.
The cigar smoking Peter Falk. No, Quilombo. And in this particular case, it's pretty straightforward. It's a song about the tribe and its leader Zumbi. I think this is a pretty cool song. Again, this song features DJ Lethal in it, but this time it also features Benji Webb, who is the lead vocalist of reggae metal band Skindred. I did not know Skindred was a reggae metal band. I never listened to Skindred. I heard one song. I didn't think that I don't recall it being reggae-ish, but I could be wrong. But I don't ever recall listening to them on any sort of regular basis for me to know anything about them and the fact that they were a reggae metal band.
I thought the lyrics were probably the most compelling part of the song. It's about a slave escaping his bonds, which is always kind of like I would say a hero's journey, and when you have a song that is about a character or a person that is reaching from the bottom and rising up, that's always a compelling aspect of a song. Bands that we talk about like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest are kind of synonymous with building up somebody as the focal character in a song, and I think that's kind of a cool feature here. So this was one that kind of stuck out to me. It's not my favorite style of music in that, like, there are variations of this new metal sound in here, but I thought that the lyrics were really kind of compelling.
Yeah, and it's very cool because it tells the story of Zumbi dos Palmares, being the guy who was one of the last kings and being the pioneer to resisting slavery. So it's a really cool, because they wanted to, I'm not going to get into it, but it's a cool song about his story. I mean, he lived in the 1600s, I think he was born in the late 1500s, died in 1645. So he's been around for a while, and his story is one of legend. So it's pretty cool. Up next is a song "Fire." That's a very up-tempo, chuggy song. Very fast. With a chorus similar to a breakdown part. It's kind of weird. It's like the breakdown is the chorus. I think that's pretty cool. Third of the way into the song, it slows down, kind of turns tribal, and then the chant that introed Tribe, the song earlier in the album, is spoken during this part. So basically, Tribe has now become a spoken word part in the middle of this song, or towards the latter part of the song. Pace picks up again about 3 minutes in, and the chorus outros the song. It's a pretty cool song, and I like how they threw in Tribe there towards the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cool heavy track. I would say this is one of the easiest ones to just rock out to. You know, if you're a casual fan, or just you hear this song, I think pretty much anybody can kind of get on board with it. The rhythms in the middle build back up to the main riff as well, which I like. So it kind of, like you said, has a breakdown section that's more of a, like, just, again, that tribal sound, but it builds back up into the main riff, which is a nice effect. And then, honestly, it ends on probably the best solo on the album.
Yeah, that's true. There's not a lot of soloing on this album at all. It's more breakdown parts, an extension of what happened in Roots. So
but it's nice to hear.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's none on Saint Anger. Going back to Zumbi real quick, I'm going to make a correction here. He was not born in the 1500s. He was born in 1655. He died in 1695. His reign as king of the Dos Palmares was from 1680 to 1695. So I want to make sure I get my information correct out there. Okay, the next song is song number 12. The song Remains Insane. That is an interesting title. It's something that really Max has taken along with him throughout the years. The song starts out with a Brazilian news report, and although I don't know what they're saying, I do know they reference Max, they reference Sepultura. My best guess is that they are. It's basically a radio news report of Max quitting Sepultura. That's my.
No, actually, it's a recording of when he accidentally stepped on the Brazilian flag at a concert and got arrested.
Well, screw me. I didn't do enough research on that part. But okay, that's cool. That's good to know, because I know you heard it, that they say his name, they talk about Sepultura, but I couldn't figure out the rest of it for the life of me.
Yeah, it's hard to understand. I had to kind of look it up and do a little research on that one. But yeah, it's a pretty cool song. It's very heavy, but it's got a lot of like that very much noisy aspect to it. I don't know the best way to describe it. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and it's a combination of a couple songs, really. I mean, it's a cover of a song, Chaos, basically, from Ratos de Porão, and then it goes into Attitude from Sepultura. So that's interesting as well. So there's some, and I'm assuming he wrote Attitude because he doesn't give any other credits other than to Dilo and João Gordo. So the song, it is pretty ruthless and brutal, if you want to look at it that way. So it is one of the heavier tracks on the album, but that's the way he is. I mean, as you can tell, the way he ended, and I say he, Max, the band Sepultura, ended Roots with Dictatorship, was it? Right? I think it was the last song.
Yeah. That's technically there's the hidden track, but yeah, that's the last official.
Right. So the way that album ends, and then this song is getting towards the end. So it's pretty cool. But it the end is interesting because it has an outro, a spoken word segment that then leads directly into the next track, which is 13 No. Do you have anything else you want to say about this one before we go into No?
No.
All right. All right, so track 13, so track 12 goes directly, so the song Remains Insane goes directly into No, and that song to me is one of the cooler songs on this album. Very chuggy, very groovy. It's probably got one of the best lines in all of metal, and I say all of metal because as much as there's been a bajillion songs written in the metal genre, there's not one song that says no bullshit, no slave shit, no motherfucking Hootie and the Blowfish. Okay? I love that line. That line is awesome.
That was actually in my notes as well. I mean, that stands out because Hootie and the Blowfish needs to be called out. And I'm just kidding, but I thought it was interesting. I mean, all these no's and in reference to political topics, just kind of like calling out everything he just sees as bullshit.
Exactly. So yeah,
it's got some industrial aspects because you got Christian Wolbers from Fear Factory, so more of a Fear Factory connection, and it's just kind of all interspersed throughout this whole album is that industrial kind of sound.
And that squealing and high pitched noise that I've talked that Andreas kind of perfected. That's part of the industrial sound that has always been a part of Sepultura and Soulfly, that I think is part of the industrial sound. Plus, the tribalness and all that stuff. He's perfected a lot of different things to make Soulfly. All right, so next song is Prejudice, song number 14. And the way I have this song is this is Soulfly, and now that I know that Skindred is a reggae metal band, Soulfly meets Skindred. This is metal reggae, and the song features Benji Webb in a more upfront role than the other song that he was featured in. And where a solo should be, another slow riff and drum-heavy chanting and rhythm part starts. So this is a unique song in that regards. I'm probably not a big fan of it, but it's unique.
Unique is a good way to put it. It's a song about anti-racism. It's heavy again in kind of that rap rock, like you said. It's reggae. It doesn't really appeal to me a whole lot. It's also just like a constant topic right now, just in general. So it's always relevant, but it's just not a track I love.
Okay. And what is supposed to be the final song on the album is called Carmageddon, song number 15. It does contain a hidden track, and we'll talk about that in a second. But this song is just an atmospheric outro song. It's really all I can say about it. And it leads into, and I say leads into it because once it dies out, you got about a minute and a half or 2 minutes of silence, and then it comes into the hidden track, which is Soltao das Matas. And Soltao is a tribal chant that's sang by what to me sounds like a woman. I'm pretty sure it is, with some additional people who clap to the rhythm and repeat the chant throughout the song. It's a short minute and a half song that ends the album.
Yeah, I mean, it's just more of kind of like tying things up in the same way that the Canyon Jam did. So
yeah, I mean, it's
not a lot to say about it. It's nice. It's pleasant.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Just literally, it's just, to me, it's very atmospheric. There was a lot of those elements throughout the album. So, for me, this album really basically cemented what Max did on Roots to be at the moment, at that given time, 1998, that cemented what Max was doing. He said, this is I did this 2 years ago. Here's me more into it, diving even deeper. The tribalism, the culture, all that stuff. He's pronouncing it that he's loud and proud at that point. And I think it works well. Obviously, it ended up being a gold record, if I'm not mistaken. So this did a lot to put him back on the map, especially after quitting Sepultura, the only band that he knew up to that point in his life.
So for me, like I can see that he's doing what he wants, and that's awesome. This is his album. He brought on a lot of other people to guest star. But this is the Max show, right? And like the tribal aspects, they're really cool again. I think that's where it shows its strongest aspects. But I cannot get behind the vocal style with all the distortion all the time. I wish it was a little more varied. It's so much all the time throughout the entire album, and in some songs worse than others. This is early nu metal. So it's not fully developed at this time. Like this is more trend setting and experimental. Like a lot of bands obviously would follow in the footsteps of this. So there is a maturity level there that I can respect, but for me it's just not my thing.
I hear you. I see you over there. No, I get it, man. The style is not for everybody. And as you can tell, and he changed over the years and he evolved, and like from primitive kind of went a little bit more, a little less tribal, a little more nu metal, but it was also experimental. And then from three on, it gets more heavier, more straight up rhythm guitars, more straight up metal-ish. But there's still more groove metal, I guess you could say, a little bit away from the nu metal portion, more into the groove metal, which is fine. But then he got more and more extreme as time went on. So, I think the one thing we both of us know is that he changed. I don't want to say he's back because that's just not the way it works for him, but he's definitely doing something more extreme than he did before. I personally like the album. So, where are you going to go with this? Which one are you siding with?
So for me, and to me, this was not a hard one. I had to go with Roots. Roots to me has more songs that I can really enjoy. It's still got a lot of Sepultura in it, even though you can see they've evolved heavily. They've really gone, and an evolve almost isn't a fair word. It's almost a mutation, because like if you say evolved, you can see, it's a gradual change in a way, from Beneath the Remains to Arise to Chaos AD.
Yeah, that's an evolution,
and you can
yes.
see that. You can see that from Chaos AD to Roots, but it's almost like they skipped a few steps. They went almost in the same vein as, I would say, like Injustice for All to Metallica. Like there's a leap there between the two. So I would say it's almost more of a mutation than an evolution, right? And that's, I guess, semantics. But for me, they still capture that feeling of Sepultura. And with Soulfly, it's too far for me. They integrated a lot of the industrial sound, which I've never been a fan of. So many guest stars. It gives it variety, but it doesn't make it as cohesive as an album as Roots is. And for me, I don't know, there's just something about Soulfly that about halfway through the album I'm like, man, this is a chore. and it's no insult to them because you can tell they're very skillful, and I love that he's trying so many different things. But for me, it was like sometimes it was just sonic assault, where I felt like sometimes with Roots there was more room to breathe. So to me, it wasn't a hard decision. Like, Roots to me is the superior album.
Okay, I see your point, and I have to counterpoint it. For me, I like the tribalism of Soulfly more than I like the tribalism of Roots. I think what he was doing on Roots, he kind of, for lack of a better term, perfected on Soulfly. But then he added all the other elements of music that he was into, the industrial portion, the nu metal, the groove metal, all that stuff, just all combined to do it all in one album the way he wanted to do it, without having to, worry about the history that was sitting behind him in Sepultura. So I see where you're coming from. But for me, I think there was more stuff for me to enjoy on Soulfly than there was on the Sepultura's Roots album. So tonight,
and I can appreciate
we're split.
That.
We're split. You went your way, I went my way.
We are in. Yes. What was the phrase? We can open up our minds and go our own way, as was said in Breed Apart.
Okay, there you go. I didn't read the lyrics.
You didn't have to. He said it 87 times in that one song.
But he was screaming. I couldn't understand that. No. All right. But it is true. We went a different direction. Okay, so that brings us now to the big four Soulfly songs. So I put you through even more torture. You had to pick 4 songs you thought were pretty good.
Well, so this really didn't end up being as much torture as I thought it would be, because, like you said, they really evolved and changed over the years, really going back and even further into death metal. And there was a lot of stuff I found that I actually really enjoyed, especially in the later years. So why don't I start off? I started the whole thing today, so why don't I start off and then you're more of the Soulfly connoisseur, so
all right.
I kind of want to hear what you think after, obviously. So my number 4 is Master of Savagery off of Savages. This is a really cool song. Like, I ended up listening to it quite a few times. It's really heavy. The album itself is very good. I was surprised because starting off with kind of what we listened to earlier with the more nu metal sound, I was very surprised that Soulfly went in this direction. My number 3 is Ritual. Is Dead Behind the Eyes from Ritual. That is an awesome track. Like, I think they've even gotten heavier as they went along, and I'm really actually very excited to listen to the new album that's coming out this year, because it's pretty heavy. Just the lyrically and also thematically and musically, I'm very pleasantly surprised by the heaviness here. My number 2 is Titans off of Archangel. Like, that is a melodic song. It is heavy, but also has a great solo in it. Very cool song. And then my number 1 is World Scum off of Enslaved. Enslaved I didn't like as much as a whole as some of the other albums that I just mentioned, but World Scum was super catchy, super melodic, heavy. The vocals are like brutal. Really enjoyed that track. Definitely going on my permanent list.
Oh, that's cool. It's on your permanent record.
Permanent record, yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, we don't have any crossover whatsoever. I don't think we even get close to an album to each other. My my stuff came off the first 4 albums, I think it was. 2 of them off the same one. It was a hard choice not to put 2 songs from one album on here, only because I really enjoy the album. But my first song is Rise of the Fallen off of Omen, which features Greg Puciato from the Dillinger Escape Plan on it. Again, him bringing in outside artists to help him. I wouldn't even say help him, just guest starring on the songs.
Yeah, I don't consider it to be like...
Yeah, it's not like, oh, I need this finished, help me out. No, it's just hey, would you like to do a solo? Yeah. Hey, would you like to sing? Yeah, so it's those kinds of things. So yeah, I like that song, Rise of the Fallen. Number 3, I kind of mentioned it earlier, Bum Clot, really cool song for me. I love the riff, I love the rhythm. That's off of the album we just spoke about, Soulfly. Number 2 is a song called Pain off of Primitive, which was their second album. That's another song that's dedicated to Dana. That, to me, that lyrically, that song hit me. And I really, really connect with that song.
I did like that one as well.
That one's a pretty brutal song at some points. There's a lot of screaming on there. But yeah, I really, really like that song. And number 1 for me is the number 1 song that they put out, Eye for an Eye. I just love that song. I mean, it's just so cool to me. So many things to like about that song if you are more into this kind of genre than you are. But it's just, it's one of those songs. It hooked me and has never let me go. So that's my number 1.
Very cool.
I like, I don't really know any of the songs that you picked because after, I think it was after Omen, or what was the album after Omen? I believe from that point on, I did not listen to much.
So now you have homework.
Yes, I knew. I do got homework. So there's Omen, Enslaved. Yeah, after Savages, I was kind of like, ugh. And then Archangel, so it's funny because you and I met, was it 4.5 years ago? Something like that?
4.5 years ago, yeah.
And Archangel came out in 2015, which was 7 years ago. And when I heard that and it was just so extreme, I'm like, you know what? I'm just not into it. I just not into it. That's why I don't even think I've even given Ritual a chance, because I was just like, no, sorry, I'm not doing it. So, but now I got changed. To. Tomorrow I have to. But yeah, so I actually have a lot of this stuff up to, I think, Enslaved or Savages, and then after that, I just went, no, I didn't want to. But then again, like you got an album like Cavalera Conspiracy, Inflicted came out. I love that album. There's really cool stuff on that album. Blunt Force Trauma. So then he goes the same route as what he did with Soulfly and Archangel and Ritual. He just went extreme. So I don't even think I've heard a note off of Psychosis, the Cavalera Conspiracy Project. So I'm going to give all those a chance now. So thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
So anyway, well, that's our big 4 Soulfly songs for tonight, and that wraps up this episode of Debating Metal. So as a reminder, don't forget to like, subscribe, and download the show on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget you can interact with us by commenting on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can send us a DM as well. If you listen to us on YouTube, be sure to leave us a comment, or you can just send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. So remember to tune into the next episode where we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.